God, like, you called me out here. Where are you? We all know the right answer, which is God never leaves you. Well, that's what my friends did.
I remember saying, like, God, you can use every other area of my life, just not that one. And I remember that moment he spoke to me and said, but what if that's the one thing I want to use?
Why would I share my feelings? If they don't care enough to go through their own stuff, why would they care about what I'm going through?
I am so proud of y'all.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the JWLKRS podcast. We are so excited that you're here. I'm your host, Allie Shinaki, and this is my co-host,
Colby Shinaki.
We are here with Jennie Allen. She is literally one of the most amazing people we have ever met in our entire lives, and we literally just saw her last week, and she couldn't get enough of us, so we flew all the way to Texas to talk to her.
But you're not wrong. What did I say to you, Kobe, when you were leaving? I was like, come hang out.
You were like, come hang out.
I want to, and you were like, dude, we have to drive really far.
Drive.
Anyway, so now we got our hangout time. I'm really glad.
But this is a place where you can just feel free to like grow with us. We are just trying to walk like Jesus. That's what JWLKRS stands for. And we're so excited that you're here. Like I said, guys, we truthfully believe that if you're here right now, it is because God has a purpose for your life. There is no accidents in this world. There's only God appointments. And if you're listening, it's because God is trying to speak to you. He wants to instill something in you to walk, for you to literally walk out in the purpose that he has in your life, for his glory, and for the greater story that he's writing. And we can't even believe Jennie's our first guest.
No, I think it's awesome.
And that we're in person. This is so right and good.
I do love that.
Yeah.
I love like podcasts where you can actually like sit there and talk to somebody and like look into their eyes and actually have like an actual conversation instead of just being over the phone. I've done so many podcasts over the phone and it's just not the same.
Better.
Way better.
I don't even think you know this, but it's my birthday today.
No, it's not. Okay, well, it's going in my calendar, and for the rest of my life, I will know.
It's my birthday today. This
Happy
is like my favorite thing ever. Thank
Sweet
you so
girl.
much. We brought you a gift.
You brought me a gift on your birthday?
We brought you a gift.
We brought you a gift.
That is not okay. I need to be giving you a gift, but I will find gifts. We're in my office. I will literally go find you gifts.
This is our
That's so cute.
first time we're ever having a guest here on the JWLKRS podcast,
Okay.
and so it needs to be memorable.
Okay.
So you're going to love this. Are you ready?
I can't wait.
Best mom
it's
ever.
wrapped. Oh, that's adorable.
Sorry, Mom. They were the only bags that they had in the
Reuse
store.
bag. Oh,
Best
I
Mother's
cannot
Day.
wait. I cannot wait. No. This is so good. I am wearing this on stage at If Gathering. Stop it right now. Look at this. Oh my gosh. I am the first. I feel so. I was special before, but now, guys, I'm putting this on right now. This is so good.
Oh my God.
Y'all, if you can't see it and you're listening, you need to go to YouTube and see the most incredible, beautiful shirt I have ever received. With our faces.
Funny
this is hysterical.
Well, what's even funnier is we got them made yesterday. We're like, we need
That's pretty
something.
impressive.
We did.
And they forgot to cut out that half of your head, so you'll see like there's like a
there's
little bit of like
it's
brunette.
It's not. It almost is real professional. It almost is, but this is amazing.
It looks great.
First guest, kind of nervous. This is so real and good. I love it. Oh wow, thank you guys.
Boom. We were a little
Feeling
nervous because we
special.
didn't know your sense of humor yet.
Oh yeah, no. This I will rock this with pride. This is amazing.
That's amazing.
Always.
I love that. That's so
Feeling
good.
really honored, guys. Thanks.
That's amazing.
Thanks for my gift, but thanks
I
for
think
my...
it looks great. I want one.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Y'all should have gotten them for you too.
So
Wow.
I don't know if you remember this, but it's been like, you've kind of been in our life for a second now. I think 3 years ago, relatively like 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, we were just talking about this on the way here in the plane. We first saw you.
Consecrate
Yeah.
in Texas. We first saw you, and I don't think you knew what that meant to us. Like we were sitting there, and it's like hard for us to listen. Well, for me, I'm not going to speak for you, but it's hard for me to actually like listen to a speaker sometimes that I like genuinely respect right off the bat, you know? And that was the first time I'd ever seen you. That was the first time I've heard of you. And just like watching you engage with this small crowd of people and treat it like they were like the only people in the world. It was like incredible. And seeing how like everything's kind of come full circle. And even back then, that was you did the thing that you do where you tell people to confess things.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This is wild. And then like moving on, you do JWLKRS conference with us, which was incredible. That was awesome. And then we do the FSU event.
Such
and
a God thing.
now we're doing this. And I just like just to honor you, like, thanks so much for everything that you're doing. Like, it's absolutely incredible. We respect you so much. You've spoken into our lives in so many, and like God is really using you. And I just want to like say thank you so much for that.
Oh, that's so kind. And this can be a big love fest, y'all, but I am so proud of y'all. And I did not know when y'all walked up to me. You walked up to me that day and we prayed together, I think, or connected. But I didn't know that y'all like were hosting the world, like y'all had this reach to Gen Z, and I didn't know. But now knowing and watching what y'all have been doing and building and how you've invested your lives into this generation, it's like I just am so proud. And of course he has risen up people. And of course it started with a family. Like this is so right and beautiful that y'all get to just love this generation, and they all want to be you. And anybody listening, that if you feel that way, you just admire them, you want to have friends like them, you want to build a family like they have. If you want to love Jesus like they love Jesus, yes, like that is good. And I think of Paul, who said, "Follow me as I follow Christ," and that's exactly what you're doing with a whole generation. And for those of us watching from the cheap seats, it's like we are going wild, cheering, and just so grateful for your lives. So grateful.
Well, thank you for that.
So,
That's
fun.
fun.
Forever I'll be your yes girl. I'll wear your t-shirt. I got you. Forever.
However long it lasts. It looks like you can't wash it.
I know. It might fall off.
I don't know if you can. don't do that.
May not last forever.
But you just put out a book. I posted on my Instagram the other day. Like, this is
thanks,
just like
Colby, that's so
genuinely, this book was a blessing. When I was reading it. It's called Untangle Your Emotions: Naming What You Feel and Knowing What to Do About It. And y'all should definitely go pick this up. I genuinely love this book. It's one of those books that you wish you had when you were younger.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
I wish I'd known this younger. Yeah.
This
is like the
100%.
learnings of my last few years, right? And I
was just like reading it. And I'm like, man, like just my process and my life story and my movements and interactions with emotions and how I've dealt with those and my story and all that type of stuff. It's just one of those things that you wish that you knew when you were younger. You wish you had this back then. And so this is an amazing book. It's really just talking about
so much.
It's
so
much.
About so much.
But the underlying idea is just like allowing yourself the time to process emotions. Emotions aren't evil. They're not meant to control you. They're meant to be felt, and they're a way to interact with people and with God. And so we wanted to just kind of go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask you, are y'all emotional?
So what's so interesting about that is we were talking about it on the plane on the way here, and you talk about two different types of people in this book. You talk about those of us like you, like me, that are very filled with emotions, and you talk about those that, like Colby,
that are not.
Not.
No, not at all.
And so we got two sides of the spectrum kind of like coming into this.
I wouldn't say I'm not emotional. Like I know feelings. And we'll get to it in a little bit. But no, I'm not like the super feelsy person.
You don't cry real easily?
No.
You don't watch a movie and just boohoo?
Depends.
You do.
Depends.
So it can happen.
In a movie, like the other day we were watching a movie for...
What movie?
It was Galentine's.
Oh, yeah, the Galentine's.
If you say you cried at Galentine's, I
No.
am going to dispute your non-emotional self.
No,
I did not cry. I did not cry.
No, I teared up because it was a really sad movie. It was a guy that just got married and then his wife passed away.
Oh,
and I'm like, that's like the worst thing ever.
Valentine
No,
movie. Oh,
no.
Okay, that's fair.
It was sad.
Like the worst
It
thing
was sad.
ever.
You got a
that
little
could
lump in your
happen.
throat?
A little bit.
Colby, yeah.
But no, you do. You definitely have both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, just really starting out this whole conversation, what was like your moment where you're like, this is what I need to write about. This is what God's kind of put on my heart. This is where I feel like I'm being led right now.
I mean, the story that comes to mind was I was in my small group that I talk about in the book and dedicated the book to. So it was a counselor-led group, which is kind of sounds woo-woo, but it was really just a bunch of girlfriends that we love each other, and then our friend that's a counselor led us. And so it really was just a really souped up small group. But we knew we were supposed to feel our feelings, and I'm actually not great at it. I'm very emotional, I'm very passionate. I'm not great at feeling sad and angry because I don't want to feel sad and angry. And I don't want to feel, now fear is, I'm a pro, I'm really good at that one. But sad and angry, I don't love. And so I just try to avoid it. And I'm like, it's fine, whatever, it's okay. And I push those feelings away. Well, this was, we were supposed to feel our feelings and we knew it. And so I show up, but I don't really see a purpose completely because I feel like, why go back and be sad about something? Like, just get over it. I wrote a book called Get Out of Your Head. I love that book. That book was easy for me to believe, write, live. I was comfortable with that because it's basically God's given us dominion over our thoughts. So when you think unhealthy, toxic thoughts, change the way you think. Yay, Bo, done. Yeah. Yes. So that part was easier for me. But feeling my feelings, that just felt scarier to feel sad. It felt scarier to feel angry. And so I go into this little retreat and I know I'm supposed to feel them. So I do it. I'm the second one to share, and we have 20 minutes to kind of share what's on our heart, our lives. What are we feeling? And so I went into some feelings I've been having about work and pressure that I've been feeling and how I felt like sometimes I would be out on the ocean where feet may fail, if you know the song, and my feet would feel like they were failing. And I was like, gosh, God, like you called me out here. Where are you? Like, why does it feel like you've abandoned me? So I'm kind of crying and yelling and mad at God.
It's a real feeling.
Real feeling. And it happens that you feel that way. And, but we all know the right answer, which is God never leaves you. Well, that's what my friends did. Immediately they started saying, I just don't think that's true. God hasn't left you. They were just correcting my theology, which I knew the right theology. In the moment, it was what I felt. And the counselor that was there, Dr. Kurt Thompson, he said, okay, guys, I want you to pause. And Jennie, how are you feeling right now while they're saying these things? And I want you to understand that I normally would have been the person saying those things. I normally would have been the person saying, here's what's true. Here's what's right. If you believe this, you won't feel that way, right? I would normally be that person. And so now I'm on the receiving end of all that. And it feels terrible. And I feel angry and I feel alone and I feel misunderstood and I feel like they're judging me. And so I just said all that. I said, I feel sad and I feel alone and I feel ticked that y'all are making me feel this way, but I just feel like you're judging me. Which was super brave to say. Yeah. And then he turned it back to them. He said, now I want you to, instead of saying, I think, which is what they've been doing. I think you're wrong. I think God is good. I think God is there. He said, I want you to tell Jennie what you feel about what she shared. And they started saying, I feel proud of you that you've stayed on the ocean, even though it feels like God's left you. I feel compassion that this has been hard for you and you haven't shared it with many people. I feel sad that we hurt you. I feel sad that you feel isolated right now. So they just said, I feel. And it was a forced exercise, right? Like it wasn't natural for any of us because we're all kind of fixers. And my heart softened. I was all of a sudden like totally reconnected with them where I'd been mad and hurt. I felt safe. I felt their love. And it's so interesting. Within the next few days, I would be alone a lot and praying a lot. I didn't feel so mad at God. I didn't feel so hurt. And so there was something magical in all of us sitting in our feelings for a minute rather than just what was right and true. And again, we weren't abandoning what was right or true. We all knew the right theology. We knew God didn't leave us. That wasn't on the table, really. It was just our experience and it was our feelings, and that felt safe. And so I think that was the beginning where I go, wow, there's a real magic to this. There's a real spiritual gospel thing to this where people are just with you in your pain. So as I did the work biblically, it was all over the place. Jesus did this well. God the Father does this well. You see David and the relationship with God the Father. You see the Holy Spirit is with us in our pain, and then we'll even translate our prayers to God the Father. So you see very emotionally driven Trinity, and then you see a bunch of emotions all throughout the Bible. And I think I just realized, wow, I've been going about this in the wrong way.
Guys, I almost just tipped over this whole table.
Wow. So yeah, that was the beginning, I think, where I started to believe this was worth exploring and learning. And it was like a muscle that I didn't have and I had to work out. I wasn't great at it, so I had to figure it out.
Yeah, I could relate to you a lot in the book because you talked a lot about being a fixer and almost like a feeling stuffer. So when things that you didn't like, or honestly that weren't true, like sometimes the enemy tells you lies, they come into your mind, or honestly just your flesh.
Right.
And I'm really good as soon as they come in my head saying, that's not true. I'm not thinking that. I'm not going to process it. I'm just going to keep going forward and speak truth over myself. But then it's all just getting stuffed more and more. Right. And you're never bringing it into the light and into the surface to allow God to, bring truth into this situation. And one of my favorite sayings that my dad, he's the biggest mentor in all of our lives. always says is your feelings are less important than God's mission over your life. And that's like, I believe that's true. And a lot of times we have to, take our feelings
Absolutely.
and put them under like
What is true? Yes.
what is true.
Yeah.
But in that, I think that I've learned to never process them.
Right.
And it gets to a point, you talk about this even in your book, how you get to a point when you're stuffing so much that you're not created to stuff your emotions like that. So you hit a point where you just break and then everything just flies out. And then you're like regretting, like, oh my gosh, why did I even handle that like that? Yeah. It wasn't even a big situation, but because we'd stuffed so much, it came out in a way that you're like, okay, something is wrong here. And so I relate to you so much just in a way of, okay, I'm going to take my emotion, and instead of stuffing it, I have to get to the root of what it really is. And a lot of times it's not the first thing that comes to your mind. No. It's actually like way rooted back to when you were even a kid in a way that's something that like made you feel. And you went through that in your book with your husband being in the hospital and not realizing that that was the root of now that feeling of being left and abandoned that your daughter was making you feel. Yeah. And so how would you practically tell us and like the people listening in a short way, because I know your book explains it into more detail, how to do that? Like how to take those thoughts and say, okay, right now, this is how I'm going to process it.
Yeah. So let me go back to get out of your head, which oftentimes helps. But before I do, I talk about in the book that emotions are like the ocean. And sometimes you're standing on the shore and they're hitting your ankles. You notice like, gosh, I feel a little sad today. I don't know what that is. But the next day you're fine, And then sometimes you're waist deep and you're in more of a season of sadness and it feels like it's longer and you know what it's about and it's hard, but you're okay. And then sometimes you're swimming and you're going, man, I'm out deep, but I'm okay. This is a season of grief, but I know it and people know it and I'm surrounded and I'm okay. And then there's times you get all the way out and you're like, I'm drowning. Like, I don't know what to do. And that really is when you need help, where this is, maybe depression has really taken a stronghold in your life, or anxiety is paralyzing and you can't get out of bed. This is when you feel like I'm drowning and I need real help. And I talk about that in the book as well. But let's talk about back on the shore, because a lot of us live like in that shallow place day to day. And we'll feel emotions and we don't know what to do with them. And there are times that thinking like what you just said you're great at is so helpful and useful. And it's like, yes, I don't need to be down today. I have so much to be grateful for. And gratitude, one of the chapters in Get Out of Your Head is gratitude is a great antidote to cynicism. So rather than sit here and feel sorry for myself or feel, like the world's against me, I'm going to go be grateful for everything I've been given. And that works. And that's true. And that's biblical. And when it talks about taking thoughts captive, that's what it's talking about. But there are times that you're waist deep. There are times that it's not as simple as just changing your mind. And you start to notice, man, I've had this nagging feeling that something's wrong for a while. That is something we're supposed to pay attention to. It's actually trying to tell you something. Like your feelings are actually, while I would not ever, what your dad says is right, because in the book I talk about will and God, basically, that we have a decision to make. Like we're always people of decision. You are never a victim to your emotions or to your thoughts. You always can make a decision. And so now, I'm not saying you can decide to not be depressed. There's times it moves chemical and you need help, but you can decide to get help, right? So there's always a deciding factor. And then emotions and thoughts are being pulled along in this train. But emotions aren't the engine, right? And that's what your dad's saying is like your emotions aren't going to decide what you do with your life. Right. You decide. And following God, you're going to follow God, not let your emotions lead. I 100% agree with that. But the church has reacted to, let's go to the unhealthy version of that, which is not what your dad's saying. So the world has made emotions the engine. The emotions are everything, because of course they are, right? Happiness is the only goal when there's no other God, right? Yeah. That's what Paul said. Like if in Corinthians, he said, listen, if Jesus isn't raised from the dead, eat and drink because tomorrow you die. Yeah. Like go have a party, go have fun, because happiness is all you've got, and it's going to go to dark. It's going to go to black. So, but if Jesus is raised from the dead, which we all know he was, then that changes everything. And now our God is God. And so the world, of course, is living for happiness. Great. That is destructive still, because anything apart from God is. Yeah. But it's understandable that that's all they've got. Right. But the church has reacted to this and gone, oh, that's so unhealthy. Feelings, are dangerous. Feelings are... Don't listen to them, because they've watched the world, and many of us, even as believers, make a wreck of our lives following our emotions. So then there hasn't been a healthy theology of it, right? It's like, okay, it's not dangerous. They're actually telling you something that is true. Now you have to dig a little to find what that is, and you have to submit all of that under the God's will, right? So if you feel like you're not in love with your husband anymore and you want to get a divorce, that's the world would say, do it. God and the people of God and the Word of God would say, because you're unhappy, that's not a reason to leave your marriage. So that's where the church is different and the Christian world is different. But there is a way to listen to that feeling and go, you know, I feel embarrassed right now about something. This happened to me yesterday. Let's go with this. I had a good friend. He's a mentor in my life. I trust him implicitly. Correct me about something I'd done, and also say that he had been hurt by something I'd said. My heart starts racing. I feel very embarrassed. I feel in trouble. That feeling I would feel as a kid, you know. I feel like ashamed. I feel sad because I love this person. He's very important to me, and I don't want to feel those things. Nobody does. So normally I would be like, get this over with as fast as possible. I don't want to feel it. I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm going to mentally tell myself everything's fine. It's okay. You know, I'm going to do the game of that. And in this situation, I think God wanted me to feel not shame, because we're never supposed to feel shame, but he wanted me to feel sad. He wanted me to feel a little embarrassed. He wanted me to be sober about the consequences of my words and actions. He wanted me to learn. He wanted me to make things right with my friend. He wanted me to do some work. And even after we got off the phone, I was like, you know, this feels really bad. And I feel like hiding. I don't feel like leading the world this week. I don't feel like getting on podcasts. But I'm not going to give that energy. I'm going to grieve my sin and my wrongdoing. And I'm going to take it to the Lord. And I cried. And I got in bed and I prayed and I cried with God. And I felt his comfort and I felt his forgiveness. And I cried with my friend and I'd felt his forgiveness and his comfort. And the next day I got up and I was ready to do the work God's put me on earth to do. And he used that. I actually got to share that on Instagram, that story.
I read it.
And people were so blessed by it. And I got texts from people that said, this just happened to me, and I just thank you for teaching me how to handle that. So God can use it all, but we have to take it to him. We have to feel it. I couldn't blow that off. I had to go there. I had to feel sad. I had to feel regret. I had to feel embarrassed. I had to feel all that. And it wasn't fun, but it was okay. And I wasn't as afraid of it as I used to be. And I think that's the health and the growth, is to go, you know, these emotions, they help us grow. They help us notice people. They help us be empathetic. They help us connect over, you know, all kinds of things. But when we push them away, we're missing out on so much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is fun.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I think I 100% agree that, like, there are certain things that you're going to have to go through in life that you're just going to have to process, like, with God, that you're going to have to, I think he puts you in situations too and brings things to the light that force you to go through those type of things. I mean, you see it constantly through, like, the Israelites. Yeah. I was just reading about it in Jeremiah, where it's like, I'm allowing you to go through this season, but I am going to fulfill the promises that I have for you. And I just think it's like, I think it's so cool that we have you talked on this. This is probably one of my favorite things that you said in the book, which was like, feelings are eternal, like emotions have been eternal. Yeah. I've never thought about them that way. I've never looked at emotions as, like, if we serve a God and follow a God that has emotions, then emotions were never created. They have been and they always will be. Yeah.
That's so cool.
I think that's, like, insane. Like, well, that's a crazy thought.
That's where there, you know, when I did the work, there was so little theology out there about emotions. And I'm going, man, this is surprising, because it's shaping our lives. It's certainly shaping our generation, right? Like, those of us alive today are emotions are the thing. It's emotional health. It's mental health. I mean, there's such a need for this right now to understand God and what he purposed them for. But I think for years and years and years in the church, I didn't know emotions were good. I thought emotions were bad.
Same.
I thought emotions were dangerous. I didn't know they were gifts. I didn't know God had given them to us to help us navigate this really broken world.
And understand who he is.
Yeah.
like he has emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly like compressing them, not understanding them, it's like limiting our view of who our creator is.
Yeah. Yeah. And we miss that connection. So what we typically do with them is we conceal, we cope, and we control them. That's what we want. That's what we try to do. And we all do it. Everybody does this. And there are times that serves us. It's not like it's always sin or evil for us to do that. It sometimes it's necessary. Like when you're about to speak and you feel nervous, like it's necessary to not listen to that feeling and to go do your job. Like that's a real, like you need to, feel that and take it to the Lord, but then you got to go do your job. So there's lots of times, like, I talked to a guy that was in the Navy SEALs. He was like, yeah, we had to do our job. We have to turn off our emotions. And then we would come back to the barracks and we would cry together. And I was like, well, that's how it's supposed to be. It's not that we're always feeling all our emotions all the time. It's that we can and we choose to at times.
I did love that. You were talking, I think it was in that section of the book too, where you said that you don't always have to feel them at that time. Like you'll know that that's something that you do need to eventually feel, but now's not the right time to do it, and you'll know when the right time to actually feel that is. And I love that too, because there's so many emotions, or there's so many times that I've like gone through different things, where I'm busy, or I'm working, or I'm doing things, and it's just like I don't have time to sit here and process.
Yeah, and so you put it. I mean, it sounds silly, but you literally just say, "I'm going to mark some time, and I'm going to go back to that." Because when you pay attention to the moments that you maybe feel hurt or something, and you pay attention to them, then you realize that they might be, just like you said, Allie, pointing to something deeper that you probably need to go revisit. So the things that happen to us when we're young, they're with us always. Yeah. We have the same brain, we have the same body. Like it's all here. It didn't go away. It's all in your body, and that's the way God made us. And so when something happens where you go, gosh, I just blew up at this thing that wasn't a big deal. Why did I do that? It's usually because there's something there that you haven't processed. And so as I've done that with people, and that is so key, you start with processing with the Lord, and by yourself, but then you've got to share it. So the steps are, you notice what you feel, you name what you feel, you find a name for it. And sometimes it's a really big word like grief, and sometimes it's a disappointment about something small. And so it's important not just to say sad. It's like, well, what kind of sadness is it? And so you give it a word, and then you feel it, you spend time feeling it and not be afraid of it. And then you share it. And that sharing is so important. And then the last step is choosing what to do with it, because we're not just going to stop there. Again, it's not the engine of our train. It's just, but the sharing thing, that's the part that'll get you. I'm going to talk about this at If Gathering. There's parts of our brain that heal when you share, when we cry together, when you mourn with someone who's mourning, right? Which scripture tells us to do. There's part of your brain that actually repairs itself and heals when you've been through trauma. And so that's how God built our minds, is to go through difficulty together. But we're so isolated and
we're embarrassed.
And we don't want to be vulnerable, because it may backfire.
Right. It's true. I mean, even like we were just at FSU with you, and you did the thing you always do, man. You call everyone out. You told us.
I don't always do it, but it has been every time you've been there.
Every single time.
That's hysterical. And yeah,
like this girl, man, I can't get away with nothing. She is constantly.
Yep.
Man, Colby told me today. He said, if I start crying, I'm leaving.
That's so great.
No, serious. I was sitting there and I was like, if she asked me how I'm feeling, I can't use one of those generic words. She talked about that in the book. I have to use the subcategory words.
I think we should do this. Well, go ahead, finish your story.
Yeah.
Long story short, every single time she's done it before, I've totally said my like half-truth thing. Every single time.
Girl.
Every time. And you even call it out too. After the first time, you're like, now say the real one. I'm like,
I did. I got back up there.
Like, you little sucker.
I knew people like you were out there.
I'm not going to say my real one. And this time around, third time's a charm.
No.
I said my real one.
You didn't.
The first time.
I'm so
first
proud
time.
of you, Allie. And wasn't it freeing?
It was so freeing.
Right?
And it amazed me because God used that to set the two other girls I was with free too. They were going through the same thing.
Of
you know
course.
what I mean? And that's just so how the enemy
alive.
works. Is he isolates us, makes us feel like we're alone in our shame, in our guilt, in whatever it is, a disappointment that we feel like we've let down ourselves, others, God, whatever it is, and keeps us quiet. But when we bring it to the light, it not only sets us free, but others as well. And so I love that you do that. I've been so free since, let me just tell you guys.
Really?
Yes.
Cool.
And this was
so
Tallahassee like last week?
Yes.
Oh, girl. That
I
makes
feel
me happy.
on a new level.
Yep.
Just you guys just wait.
I love it. I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I haven't even told anybody that.
Okay, but back to Kobe's feelings.
Oh, okay. What do you
Well,
want to know?
first of all, I'm really proud of you.
Thanks so
I
much.
want you to hear me say I feel proud of you. Okay, so what are you afraid? Like, what do you mean you're afraid of crying? What
Yeah,
do
let's
you-
talk about
let's
this.
talk
Oh
about
gosh,
it.
therapy session?
Yes.
Is that what this really is?
Yeah.
I was really hoping this would happen.
When's the last time you felt sad?
Oh, I don't know when the last time I felt sad was. So here's the thing. I'm not bad with emotions.
Okay.
So I think the way that I've always grown
His
up.
neck's getting red. I just want everyone to know that. I'm like, just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm being
No, it
so
is.
hard
She's
on
not kidding. I can feel it.
But why? Let's go to that. Like, what do you worry? What do you feel?
Oh, we were just talking about this. We were just.
Yeah, we had a whole heart-to-heart on the plane yesterday.
So I think I've just grown up with I don't really want people to feel bad for me. I don't want people to pity me. I don't really I don't like telling my whole story and people being like, "Oh, that's so sad for you," and I'm like, whatever. And then I was saying this, and as I was thinking about it last night laying in bed, another reason I don't like it is because I know that there's so many people out there that don't really care, right? And so why would I share my feelings with somebody who doesn't really care enough to go through their own stuff? But also, if they don't care enough to go through their own stuff, why would they care about what I'm going through? And so it's just like, oh, I feel bad for you. You know what I mean? So I just don't care.
Yeah.
I just don't care for that. But I've always grown up.
Sure. Nobody wants that feeling. Nobody
No.
wants pity. That
No,
just
I don't.
Yeah.
I've just grown up like that. And then I've grown up with, this is how I deal with things, right?
Okay.
I deal with things by, I know what I feel, where it's like, oh, I'm upset. That made me mad. That made me sad. That made me feel confused, you know?
Yeah.
And so I've go through that, but I name it, and that's where I leave it.
yeah.
I don't think I have allowed myself to process it. That's why I was like, I wish I had this book when I was younger,
Yeah.
because it's like, if you could learn those things when you were younger and allow yourself like the discipline to go through that type of stuff and actually allow God to do the work as you're growing up, then you don't really have so much stuff to uncover and deal with later on in life. But I feel like there's a lot of people like that where it's just they get there, they're like, I'm upset because of that, and then they just leave it there.
They do. Yeah, and I think I want to stay with you, and I want to ask you if you're comfortable. And again, y'all can take this out or whatever you want. I don't want to go into any details. Let's give it a name, like your childhood, whatever. Give yourself an age, like that was the hardest. We're not going to go back to that moment, but let's say you were what age?
I'll say 14.
Okay, so 14, and then we're gonna label the box that you likely put a lot of stuff in. 14. Okay, we're gonna put it on the shelf.
Okay.
We're just gonna take it off and we're gonna put it on the table. We're not gonna open it. We're not getting all juicy here on the
All right.
podcast. But we're gonna put the box on the table and we're just gonna talk about the box. We're not gonna talk about what's in the box.
Okay.
That I will leave for off air.
All right.
But I do want to talk about the box and what scares you about it. Like if you were to undo it, like if you were to say, I'm going to go back and I'm going to feel this and I'm going to look at this and I'm going to really process my 14th year of my life with someone, what would scare you about doing that?
I think the thing that scares me is going back and addressing things that I think it's really the idea that there's certain things that you have to own up to, and you'd rather live ignorant to it, and you'd rather live oblivious to it than to go back and actually admit that you were wrong, or to go back and actually deal with those things. So I would say the thing that scares me the most is just the idea that going back and addressing the fact that maybe I was wrong, maybe.
Do you feel like a whole different person than that?
Oh, yeah.
You are.
Oh, yeah.
So that's been great because you're like, this person and this person have nothing in common, right? The problem is that person's still you.
Yeah.
And that person is still with you. Like, and there's shame. So this is the power of it. Let me give you an example. Is I have things in my past too. And so mine is a 12-year-old box. And there's all kinds of things in that 12-year-old box as far as who my identity and who I thought I was and who I am today is night and day from that. But the same feelings I used to feel as a 12-year-old kept showing up in my 40-something self. And I was very bothered by that because I didn't want I needed to be healthy and do the work God had called me to do. And I needed to like go and be brave, and I needed to be bold, and I needed to do all that. But this 12-year-old like kept showing up when I was about to do things that were important for the Lord, and that bothered me. And so I went, that was worth going back to that box. Does that make sense? So it was like, I want to be free of that feeling that I get, and that anxiety that comes up that I'm made to do this and I can do it. But there's a part of me that's freaking out and nervous, and not just nervous. It was so much more than that. It was anxious. It was afraid, and it was afraid of failure, and it was afraid of, and all of that, when I talked to, my counselor was like, he said, let's go back to that 12-year-old. And so we would talk about the 12-year-old, and everybody listening might not relate to that. Like, you might go, gosh, I'm only 16 or I'm only 18 and not a lot's happened in my life yet, but it will. And I think for most 18-year-olds, it probably has, and I think those things you can cope for a little while, but when you go back to it, what you'll find is you're really proud of that 14-year-old. I know that 14-year-old made mistakes, but that 14-year-old doesn't know everything you know today at 27. And that 14-year-old was probably doing the best he knew to do at that time. And so while you look back at him and go, man, I wish, like, I'm gonna have to deal with things, and there are consequences, and this hurt people. There are all these things in this box. Reality is, I look at that 14-year-old. You don't even have to tell me what you did. I don't care. You could have, shot somebody. I would be like, I'd hear your whole story, and I'd go, yeah, that was hard. Yeah, that was a mess, and there was a lot that brought you to that moment and to that time. And so I think what happens is when you have compassion on it, it's like, okay. And again, we're not justifying sin. We're not, nothing like that. But we're just saying this life is really a big old mess. Like there's a lot of mess everywhere you go, and it doesn't totally get easier. It kind of gets harder. Yeah. And so what I'm going to talk about at If Gathering too is just, we end up, I talked a little bit about with the ropes. That was the first time I'd done that, but I'm going to do it again this time and talk about just how we end up stuck in how we think God's viewing us. Like when you're like that and you're completely stuck, how do you think God's viewing you? And he's so gracious.
He's so gracious.
He's so gracious. And we can't, it almost feels heretical to say that he's gracious for our sin. Yes, because he died for it. He gets to be. And that was his choice. And so I think that's where I would say it's less scary than you think. Yeah. Because when you do it and you go, man, I'm going to say this, and you can do this work later and call me, and it might be in your 40s, but you can say, Jennie, you were right. I have a feeling you would go back to that box and you'd pull everything out, and somewhere in there you'd say, I'm proud of that kid. I'm proud of that kid.
Okay. So I think, now that I thought about it, I think what the real thing is my story. We can talk about my story another time, but my story has been working so hard to be pulled from chaos, and I think going back to those things feels like you're going back to it. But I also feel like something that a lot of people deal with is the fact that you're older now and you feel like you should be past those type of things and you should be moved on. And the fact that you have to backstep and go back in life to like be able to move forward, I think people just, and myself, would rather not go back.
So I want to reframe a word for y'all, and some of you may have never heard this word. It's called sanctification. Yeah. And we think of sanctification as pulling our act together so that we do the right things. But sanctification is a work of God. Sanctification is a purification of our hearts, and our the fruit that comes out of that is obedience of our lives. It's us becoming more like God as we are going. I want to say and challenge that sanctification is going back to the parts that didn't make sense with God. So now you know Jesus. Now you walk with Jesus. And he's like, let's go back and let's look at these parts in your life and let's do it together. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to be with you. And we'll look at it together, and I'll help you untangle it. I'll help you make sense of it. I'll help the chaos. And why I really believe that's important and true is you look at the women at the well, and he wasn't going to just start from that day. He was like, you've had 5 husbands. And he went back. He's like, it's not enough for you to change today and be okay. I want to go back and I want you to understand we're going to redeem all of it. Like, I'm going to make right all of it. I know it all, and I'm going to make it right. And so I think we're afraid, but his grace is sufficient for tomorrow's mistakes, and it's sufficient for yesterday's difficulty, whatever it was, it's the way we are made, that we carry with us all of the hurts and all of the things. And he's like, I'm not content. God says, I'm not content just to heal you from this day forward.
Yeah.
I want to heal your past. I want to heal your
good.
abandonment. I want to fill the gaps. And a lot of that will be done in heaven, but why wouldn't we want to do that now if we could? And so I think it's a bit, like when I think of, first of all, Colby, I love you so deeply for just being this vulnerable and saying everything you said.
I told Allie in the elevator, if she has questions, I'll be honest.
I love it. Well then, yes. And I would understand if you didn't want to be, but I do think it's so helpful for people because they're listening to you going, man, like y'all are just the happiest, seemingly most perfect family in the world. And so to know like I know, but it is.
That's funny.
TikTok, it makes you feel that. And so to hear this, like this is why this podcast is going to be so powerful, like for people, it's the behind the scenes. It's like, this is the stuff we learn. These are the things we're struggling with. This is what's hard. This is what's good. And so for you to be that honest, I just think it helps everybody else go, yeah, like I feel that way about my past. I feel that way, Colby. Like when you say that, I get it. I am that way. But I can say I've done it. And I pulled the box off, and it wasn't as scary as I thought. And it actually set me free. I mean, just as a testimony, like the things that used to make me nervous, all this was happening right before I spoke at Passion 2 years ago. And that was the year that I was in counseling. And it was crazy because Passion should have been one of those moments where it was like, there's a ton of pressure. There's no doubt. Like, as far as Christian world, like, I don't know that gets more pressure than 66,000 students in a venue. And so, but I didn't, like my 12-year-old didn't show up. My anxiety I was clear. I got to think about what that room needed. I got to go and serve God in that room and not be the 12-year-old that still needs to measure up. Does that make sense? So I think that's the benefit is you go back and you heal these parts of you, and then all of a sudden you're able to to not feel the things you used to feel, all the anxiety and the worry.
And God goes through it with you.
He does.
And like as I've been working, I know you've seen this too, just with like all the stuff that you've been through, is like that he goes through it like right beside you. Mm-hmm. And going back to what you were saying earlier is just like, and you talked it on in your book, the story of Lazarus with Mary and Martha, where Jesus knew full well what he was going to do. He already knew that he was going to heal Lazarus, that he was going to resurrect him. And then Martha was just like, you can do this. Why? What are you? You showed up late. What are you doing? Where were you? And then Mary's just like going through it, and Jesus is weeping with her. And it's just like you see God in a way that you never have seen him before, where it's just like sometimes you don't need him to fix things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need him to go through it with you.
Yeah.
And like to feel. And like that verse where it's like he's acquainted with your grief.
Yeah.
And it's like he feels all the things that we feel. And it's allowing him to just like, it's looking at God as, I'm not trying to tell you something, I want to go through it with you.
Yes.
And I think that's more powerful sometimes than just giving you a Bible verse.
Well, and you'll feel this because y'all have been through things and you'll go through things and you'll be crying with a friend and they'll do what my friends did to me, which we've all talked about and we're all good now. The book's dedicated to them. Like they helped me do this, where they fix you, and you realize like, wow, that doesn't feel good. Like I don't want that. And it changes you and you go, man, I want to be safe. And so, the easiest, simplest thing you can do that everybody can take away that's so simple is instead of when someone's sharing something with you, instead of saying, I think, say, I feel. Say, that makes me feel sad with you, or whatever it makes you feel. And it just changes the conversation. And scientifically, again, I love the science because the science always backs up the Bible. It's so wild. But the science would say mourning with those who mourn is it heals your brain, but it also, like what the science will say, is it moves you into a different part of your brain. And it's the place for connection. And that's what we're wanting. We're wanting connection in those moments. We want to not feel alone in our sadness. We want to know that we're not, it's bad enough to be sad. It's way worse to be isolated and sad, right?
Yeah.
And so we're wanting connection. And for when we move from I think to I feel, it moves us into the part of our brain where we connect and can be there for people.
Yeah, you said it earlier that when your friends responded like that, and their heart was right. Like they wanted, they saw the truth because they weren't in your situation. So many times we see the truth when it's not our situation.
Yeah.
And we want to share, like we want to save
think it's
people
gonna fix
so
it.
bad. You know what I mean? We want to fix because you love somebody. But you said that after that, when your counselor said, okay, how did that make you feel? That it was a brave step of you to like say, you know what, that hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like that is such a brave step. And I even dealt with this like literally right before I started reading your book with my boyfriend Austin. Is I had a similar situation where I preach the truth to myself all of the time. I know what the word of God says and I know when an emotion isn't right, but sometimes I just have to put it out there to like just say it. And I just want him to be like, Allie, I know you're trying your hardest, but like you got this. It's all I want to hear. You know what I mean? And I confided in him and he was like, yeah, but you shouldn't feel that way because this, and this. And I was like, boom, wall up. Like I'm never sharing anything again.
Yes. It's
That's
real.
the easy thing
It's
to do
real.
is I'm never sharing anything with you again.
Yep.
Because it's not a safe place. I feel misunderstood now because I already know the truth. I know everything that you're saying right now. Stop talking. I'm getting more mad. Now I'm frustrated. Now I'm more upset. And so it really like is a brave thing. And I did exactly what, you know what I mean? I'd read in this devotional before this. God's been working on my emotions for a second. It was a devotional about like emotions as well and identifying what they are. And then between that and your book, I took a second, I breathed, and then I went through my notebook and I like processed, okay, why did I just respond like that to Austin? I know he was trying to help me. What did that really make me feel? Why did it make me feel that? How is this impacting our relationship? How is this impacting my relationship with God? And like, I took like 30 minutes and wrote down all these things.
So good, Allie.
Met with him the next day. Our relationship has been like completely different.
Wow.
Like ever since, because you don't really realize how much, or I didn't even realize how much that one adjustment impacted multiple different areas of our relationship I didn't even know existed. Like how many conversations and hurts that had been brought up in the past that I kind of just built that wall up and never resolved came into my mind that I was like, wait, let's talk about this now too. Let's heal this now too. To where he does go back. God redeems not just where you're at. He goes back and redeems your past. And I just want to encourage you guys too, as Colby and Jennie were talking, it reminded me so much of when I was young. I loved to sing and I allowed the enemy to plant lies in my mind. And because of it, I stopped singing. I stopped worshiping. I compared myself, and that lie just built and built and built till it was a brick wall that felt like it didn't matter what I wanted, what happened, it could never come down. I couldn't face the feeling of disappointing myself, the people I loved, God. And I remember like 2014, I was at this conference. I don't know if you've been to Forward Conference.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Jensen Franklin is like one of our favorite pastors.
Yes.
I was at this conference and I remember God speaking to me. I've never shared this ever. And I was sitting there and he just put, Allie, whatever you won't give to me is something you're holding back from me. I can't use you fully to what I want to because you're not able to be used 100%. You have to give that up. You have to give it up. And I remember saying, like, God, you can use every other area of my life, just not that one. Like, come on, you're not going to disqualify me because I'm not giving you that one thing. And I remember that moment he spoke to me and said, but what if that's the one thing I want to use? And I was like, oh, gosh, right? And in that moment, I wish I could have said that it was my moment that I repented and I was like, I'm going to give you my everything. But I didn't. And I didn't until the JWLKRS conference where I like sang on stage for the first time in front of everyone. And when I was preparing for that message for the JWLKRS conference and I talked to my sister, and my sister actually planted it on my heart. It was like, Allie, if you're going to preach to people, they got to break free from everything, surrender all, you better surrender all. And I was like, wow, oh, I don't want to, right? But I'm going to do it. You're right, Ella. I'm not going to be a hypocrite.
Go,
like,
Ella.
I've got to do it. And I remember in that moment, like just going through, I could
was
feel.
Was this the recent one that we were?
Yes.
That's wild. Because I was going to ask you when you surrendered everything, because that, in my experience, that is prior to the Lord using you. And that's my story. That's a lot of people's story.
That is so my story.
Wow.
Like, so I was even telling Colby on the way here, ever since the JWLKRS conference, something has just shifted. Yeah. And there's just a new like anointing and favor that has nothing to do with us.
You're not wrong.
And all to do with God's grace and like obedience. Just use me. You know what I mean? But I remember like even in that moment when I had decided in my heart, I'm doing this. Like I'm not letting the enemy take even 1%.
Wow.
Because if it's little, it's big to God. Like he wants our everything. And the enemy would come in my mind. He'd try to tell me like, Allie, you already disqualified yourself back then. Like all of those moments that God could have used you, like you missed out. You missed out on the purpose he had for you. You missed out on the calling that he had for you in that way. He used somebody else. And I was like, no, you know what? I don't care. I'm starting from here. And I did it. And I'm so happy that I did not let the enemy make me believe that I disqualified myself from what God had for me, because maybe I did miss out on opportunities in the past, but I know that I'm not going to miss out on opportunities in the future he has for me. And that's what I want you guys to focus on right now is it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you've held back. God forgives you. He's gracious with you. He wants you to start right where you're at. And I'm going to say one more thing. It's kind of been on my heart as you guys have been talking. But that you said God's mercy, God's grace, God's so gracious to us. And all morning, literally all day, I've been thinking of the verse that says God's kindness is what leads us to repentance.
Yes. That's so good.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the most
kindness. It's his kindness to lead us to the boxes to go heal.
No,
I mean,
it
yes.
really is. And I even coming
He's
into
not
this,
mad. He loves you and he wants you to be free.
and he's for us. And he's not standing there like so many of us feel. And I felt myself waiting for us to fail.
Well, and the reason you'll never go back is because this is so much better.
Oh my gosh, it's so much
we
better.
think it's going to be so hard to give everything up. But on the other side, it's like, why was I even holding on to that for so long?
It's fake. The fear was so fake.
Yeah.
And, like, honestly, in comparison to what God has, the fear was so small. It's ridiculous. I can't believe I let it rob me from that many years. But going into this podcast with you, I was like genuinely a little nervous, but also excited because emotions, especially controlling my emotions, has been probably my biggest struggle in my life, period. Growing up, I truthfully believe, you talked about this in your book, emotions can be a generational thing that if you're not learning how to process, they just go down from children to children to children to children. And I believe God gave my family the gift of passion. If you meet us, we are all so passionate.
Y'all are.
And when we're passionate about the right things and the way God's intended, it's amazing. It can be a weapon for good. But when it is passionate about something that is not aligned with what God says, it's bad and it's destructive. And that was me. Growing up, I was so emotionally controlled and driven, and my family, like, as well, honestly. I was probably the worst at everyone, but we all kind of struggled with that because of generations before us. And I remember like getting into arguments with people, and I was just known as the girl that could not control herself. Like I was just known, and that became my identity. And that was really, really hard because I did not want that to be my identity. I wanted so bad to break free from anger, to break free from all of these things. Like it wasn't who I knew God created me to be, but no matter how hard I tried, I could not break free. And then I began to suppress my emotions. And
it's embarrassing.
It's
and you
embarrassing.
Don't wanna,
And so instead of bringing things up to people, I would just suppress them, which created division between me and people. And it wasn't fixing it or keeping the peace like I thought it was. It was actually creating just havoc inside of myself and my relationships. And then ultimately, it didn't matter if I was like good for like 6 months, 7 months. I thought I was doing good on a roll. I would ultimately burst. And then people would say to me, see, you never control your emotions. You need to learn. You're like this ever since you were little. And I took that as my identity, like, oh, I'm going to be like this forever. And then I remember getting into a relationship with Austin. And that, unfortunately, was because of all that I had gone through, because of this lie and all these years that had been built up. Austin was a victim to that sometimes. And he impacted me so much because I remember like a specific moment that we were fighting in the car, and this side of myself that I was not proud of, that I wanted to hide from him forever, came out. And it showed and it revealed itself like it always will if we don't deal with it. And instead of looking at me and saying like, you're always like this, everybody's told me this about you, he looked at me and said, hey, Allie, like, I love you so much. For your own self, you don't want to do this. And I was like, I was just so mean to you. How could you ever tell me you love me and call me higher? And that was the first time anyone had ever done that in my life. And it wasn't because the other people in my life didn't want to. They just like, we all kind of dealt with that. And when Austin's love and his grace and his goodness revealed itself in a moment that I was so broken and embarrassed and shameful, it changed my life forever. I saw that I can control my emotions, that this isn't something that is evil that's trying to control me. It's something that's trying to tell me something. And I've got to get to the root of what that is. And from that day forward, like, I've been getting better.
Yeah.
And that was 2021.
Yeah.
Like, it took me 21 years
Sure.
to just realize that my emotions aren't bad. They're not trying to control me. I just have to understand what they're telling me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Because it's like this. Like I remember walking in, and I know we're almost done here, but I remember walking in to I was feeling a lot of anxiety, and I normally would have blown kind of like you. Like I would walk in, my kids would have been short. We would have all blown up at each other because we're that way. We're like near Italian. This is how we are. And instead I stopped and I was like, okay, I feel anxious. Why do I feel anxious? And I took that to the Lord and I was like, this is what I'm anxious about. I took it to him and I was able to come in with more compassion. And I really think it's funny. We think pretending we don't feel mad is what we need to do. But it's like, no, I actually feel mad. But why do I feel mad? And like noticing it. And then we're able to say, this hurt me. We're able to have better conversations and to have conversations that are mature and to say, I do feel angry, but I'm not sinning in my anger.
Right.
Because scripture says, in your anger, do not sin, meaning you can be angry and not sin. So there's a sense of like, okay, my feelings are hurt right now, but I'm going to bring this to you in a way that is articulate. The way you went away with God and journaled and you were like, this is what I'm feeling in this, and you brought it back to him and the conversation was different. That is a model. Like to notice, to name it, to take a minute with the Lord, to feel it, and then to share it. Like that changes everything.
Well, and it's in those moments that your relationships with people and with God grow.
Yeah.
And the foundation, like just like, man, like that stakes in the ground so much more.
That's what we miss. If we just push them away and pretend no, emotions are bad and let's not, then you miss that connection with the Lord. Because think of how many times you've been with the Lord and cried or been mad or felt something with the Lord. Like those have marked my relationship with God. Those moments are why I'm close to the Lord. And so we don't want to miss those. That is the great part. And then of course too, when we share, Colby, for the rest of our lives, I'm gonna feel closer to you and everybody that listened is too. And I know,
that's right.
I know you didn't like share your guts out, but you shared enough that I feel like I know you better. And so there is a connection that comes when you're brave and you say all of it. So yeah, it's worth it.
I think the communal aspect is something that we all need to get better at, because I can share with God.
Yeah.
I'm good with sharing with God.
Yeah.
I'll go sit in my room and I'll put on some worship music, or I'll just sit there and I'll like do my best to like tell God what I'm feeling, how I feel. So I'm good with that. I think there's that verse in James which talks about like confess your sins to one another, and there's the healing. And there's the healing process. And that's when like things actually start to come in, when you confess to one another and you allow that I said it before, as long as it stays in the dark, you're going to believe it.
Yes, that's where all the power is. Yes.
And as long as like you keep these things in and you're not sharing them with other people that love you and like finding your people that you do life with, because you don't have to share with everybody. You don't have to go around confessing everything to everybody, but confessing it to the people that are closest to you, confessing it to the people that do love you and do want to call you higher and do want the best for you. That's where healing's going to be, and God's going to be in the midst of all of that. And I look at David in his life and how he confessed all these emotions and it wasn't sinful.
Right.
And like Psalms,
God wants it. God welcomes it. Yes, that's what he wants. He wants us to be close to him. He wants us to bring it all to him.
Yeah, and I think just kind of to end this, we just wanted to ask like one question, which is like with the If Gathering coming up, with the book coming out, with just like everything going on in your world, what are you believing for right now?
Well, I believe that revival is happening. It's happening. We're in the middle of it. We both felt it. We all three felt it at Tallahassee last week. I think it's happening. And I think y'all are in the middle of it. We felt it at JWLKRS. Y'all, how many people did y'all baptize? Like it's crazy. Yeah. It's happening. And so I think I don't want to miss it. I just want to be in with whatever God says do. I want to do it. And so it's fun time. It's a fun time to be alive.
Such a fun time to be alive.
It's great.
I think so too. I get so fired up about this stuff. Y'all don't want to get me started. We've already been on an hour.
I love it.
No, but honestly, it has been just the biggest blessing to have you. I could have never imagined when we ran into you literally in Texas 3 years ago that you would be the first guest on our JWLKRS podcast.
I love it.
God is just so good.
Proud.
Yeah. We need to get ours made. First guest, kind of nervous.
Yep.
But we seriously love you and we admire you so much. And we just cannot wait to see the lives that are impacted at the If Gathering. our lives. I mean, we're here. Like, this is crazy.
I'm excited for it.
I know. I love it.
pumped.
I love it.
But
I'm
make
so
sure you
glad
guys
you're here.
get your copy of Untangle Your Emotions. I promise you guys will not regret it. This book is amazing, and you're going to wish you would have got it sooner.
Love
So
it.
we love you guys so much. Have an amazing week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all of your friends.
You got this.
I said
I'm just
subscribe
wa-
because
I'm sitting by and watching.
I'm so used to YouTube. Do we subscribe?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
You
subscribe.
can subscribe to a podcast, guys.
You can subscribe to a podcast?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Believe it or not, this is also on YouTube.
Guys, do all of the good things that you know how to do. We cannot reach to the ends of the earth without all of us working together. We love and appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye, y'all.
Bye.